Helps if I've turned it on first, but there we go. Thanks, everybody. If we start with a public participation session, and then just say who you are for the benefit of the recording. Thank you.
No, I don't need a seat. You're all right. Thank you.
I'm just getting that way.
I'm used to standing and tugging my forelock when I speak to my wife. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Martin Jones. Apologies for taking up your time again. Unlike the bad smell we encountered yesterday, I shall be leaving. Right, good evening, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you on behalf of town residents and neighbouring parishes. Councillor Walker, can you inform us whether you have challenged the planning department over the decision not to conduct a pre-application EIA on the 350 homes at the Mount Racecourse Road? If not, why not? I understand that some county councillors believe, as it should come before them, should any application be submitted, they will have an opportunity to raise any objections then. This is not acceptable to residents whose voices will not be heard. And by then, it may have even stopped raining, which unfortunately won't show the rivers of rainwater cascading through the fields onwards towards Oswestry and ultimately Maysbury Road wastewater treatment plant. The planning applications are heard here at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday evening, not 2 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon in Shrewsbury, where only one person can speak against an application or for. We expect and deserve better from a planning department, also county and town councillors here. My own council will be discussing an application to extend a dairy farm next Thursday. We will consider the implications of the additional farm traffic and its impact on Oswestry, i.e. Upper Brook Street. We urge you to do the same, particularly as the planning department has failed communities surrounding this farm on many levels and continues to do so daily. This department is abdicating its responsibility to taxpayers already dispirited by excessive rate rises and diminishing services. Other planning applications locally include schools, nurseries, doctors and dental provision. Oswestry is estimated to grow by approximately 20% in the next 2 years. It has no services built into any new developments. Why? Why are we paying for a substandard service and no engagement or responsibility for a department that has seen massive staff changes but still no change in attitude? And a gentle reminder that also, if you're sitting in the room as a two-hatted councillor, Oswestry should come first, not party. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your attention, and my apologies if I have offended.
Thank you, Martin. As I said, because we had a chat on Saturday at the Green Gen Fermi Frankton public session on Saturday in Welsh Frankton. I've queried it because Councillor Kerr had queried it because my assumption was that it would need an EAI, but Councillor Kerr and myself have seen the officer's statement, the form they've filled in to do that. Senior officers are happy with what's been done, and they're content that there's still every opportunity through the normal process when there is a plan application that all of these issues will be covered. So I've not challenged it in that respect in the way you've intended the question, because officers are paid professionals to do a job and I have to respect their judgment. I'm not paid professional. I can give my opinion, but that doesn't carry the same weight and is not subject to challenge in the same way that if there's an error in their judgment, it is subject to challenge and judicial review and all the normal processes. It'll still be, as I said before, It will come to here as a planning application and be considered by the planning committee here if an application comes forward. But as I said to you on Saturday, this is an Oswestry Town Council planning meeting. It's not a meeting of Shropshire Council, and there are other more appropriate mechanisms to challenge me on things about Shropshire Council than using Oswestry Town Council as a platform.
But this was a specific town council
Yeah,
application?
yeah, but you prefaced your question was to me directly as a cabinet member,
On the one point, yes.
and
And I appreciate that, and I appreciate the time you spent with me on Saturday
yeah, yeah.
when you didn't have to, and you took a great deal of time,
Yeah.
and very politely.
But in terms of
Position to me.
the other points you've raised, there's nothing to stop anybody getting video evidence of everything in preparation for any application that might come.
Which has been
Yeah.
submitted to.
So
Thank you very much.
So there are mechanisms to do it and engage in the process in all the normal way that as I've explained before, the EIA is a request from the developer because they've got concerns to do a pre-screening of that to see whether they need the full assessment or not. And officers have decided they don't need the full assessment. That doesn't mean that issue is discarded and never discussed again. All of those issues still have to be considered in full by a full planning application and the process. So residents, everybody will still have the full say on the full process. But as I say, it's not appropriate for me to be arguing and because in one sense, you've challenged the opinion of officers at Shropshire Council and they're not here to defend themselves. So that's all, you've got to be careful.
Honestly, I take your point. Thank you very much for allowing me forward. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, no,
Thank
it's
you very
okay.
much.
But I didn't take offence. But I just have to underline it. That's all.
Certainly, thank you.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Item 2, apologies for absence.
Apologies for absence have been coming in last minute, so just bear with me. Councillors Johnson, Councillors McKinney, Brindley, Moore and Roberts. All personal reasons.
Item 2B, disclosure of councillors' interest in any matters in relation to the Code of Conduct. Rosie.
I'm a Shropshire councillor. I'm a member of the Northern Planning Committee. Any decisions, discussions made today may be different from that when I get to Shropshire Council.
Councillor, but I'm not struggling to think it's still relevant to it.
Councillor
Yeah, I disclose that I'm the Vice Chair of the Northern Planning Committee. And as Councillor Radford has just said, any decisions or any observations I make now will not affect my decisions in the Shropshire Council meeting, where I will have additional information to actually work on at that point. Could I also say that where an application is in my ward, as in the case on this agenda tonight, I am actually excluded from the decision making at Shropshire Council, so I can make observations here because it won't compromise me actually in Shropshire once I go, the planning committee is sitting. Thanks.
and as I've declared before, I'm the Shropshire Council planning portfolio holder, but that's a strategic role and doesn't get involved in individual applications. Has anybody else got anything they need to declare? Okay, thank you. Item 3, the minutes. You've all had a copy of the minutes. Is everybody happy they're a true and accurate record? Jonathan?
Move we adopt, Chair.
That's seconded. Item 4, planning applications. White Gables, 8 Cabin Lane. Has anybody got any comments on that one? Has anybody got a proposition for what we want to do with that one then? No comment at all then? Is that what you want to do? Okay, right. Fair enough. It's better for planners if you actually give them a comment rather than nothing.
It was on. Looking over this application, there are no public comments on it. From what it looks like, it's a straightforward demolition of a building with structural problems with a more modern building. It looks good. I've got no... I'm not bothered too much about anything in there. There's nothing which I would actually make comments on, but I would certainly not approve it. I would certainly be in favour of the taking of a building and bringing it up to scratch.
So, Owen.
Was that a proposal to support?
I don't see why not. Yes, go on. Propose support.
So I'm happy to second that we support it. I also don't see any issues with it, and given that there are structural issues, I think allowing it to also be it's being converted into a bungalow, which there is a need for across the town to allow more accessible housing for people. So it's also generally suits that need as well. So happy to second the support.
Okay, thank you. Your mic's on, Rosie. Does that mean you wanted to speak now? Oh, okay. Yeah. It's been proposed and seconded. So is everybody in favour of that? Please show. Thank you. Thank you. Kingdom Hall, Coney Green. Has anybody got any observations on this one? Jonathan?
I've looked at this planning application, the application form that was uploaded to the portal, and I've got a few concerns with regards to whether any kind of authority has been consulted on this. It says that a light prune is needed for safety purposes, and it says a tree surgeon will be doing it, but I would very well like the tree officer at Shropshire Council to look at this, or if they have already looked at it, for that to be denoted at the meeting. Others here may disagree with me, but I can't comfortably vote no observation unless I have this information at hand.
So you propose an approval subject to the tree officer
I am, yes.
being in agreement?
Yeah, I had to look up what TCA was on the planning portal. It's actually a tree conservation area application, which I hadn't come across before. It's basically similar to a tree preservation order, and the application does require, I believe, the various tree officers and things to be involved. So I take the councillor's point. I can't see personally any problem with this. It's a maintenance of a tree to make sure it's not too big, it's not overhanging and causing problems for passers-by, because that is a walkway to go down to Sainsbury's from the Coney Green. But I take the point that the tree officer does need to be involved at the least.
So you've seconded that. So it's been proposed and seconded. Is everybody in favour of that? Thank you. Too many tabs open. Hang on a second. Three Pigeons. Has anybody got any comments or observations on this one? Mr. Kerr.
Yeah, it's curiously worded. It says the application is following a demolition of the Three Pigeons, and I'm just clarifying that I don't think we've ever had an application to demolish the Three Pigeons, and I would have thought that in itself would require consent, and if this is consent to both demolish and build, then I do have concerns, because I think the Three Pigeons has been a long-standing community benefit asset to the area. I have spoken to the previous landlord, And, yeah, I mean, people can say what they like, can't they? But he's fairly adamant that it was not closed because of any lack of trade. He believes there were other reasons why it was closed. So it may be right, may be wrong, but I would want to see verification that there is actually no viable business there before I could countenance the demolition and loss of that as an asset. But I say again, it's a bit complicated because the application says to build this following demolition, as though demolition had already been given. But to my knowledge, demolition has not been given. So I don't know whether you or the clerk or anybody can clarify what the situation is.
Well, not in time for actually making a decision now. So you could make whatever decision subject to that being in place.
Make comment on the basis that it's an application to both demolish and build.
Yeah.
So it suggests we oppose this on the basis that we have not got any information that this is not a viable business anymore, and I want to see that testifiability.
Yeah.
I've seen no attempt to seek tenants for this property to relet it, and I understand from the previous landlord there was a viable business there. So he may be wrong, may be right, but that's what they are saying. I also think there's a lot of accommodation in flats in this area, and to build yet more flats in this area is possibly not the prime site for it, so I'd raise concerns as to whether this is appropriate given the density of population and density of flats already in that area.
So those are all concerns, or are you framing it as an objection? The first bit's an objection.
Get to demolition,
with the
I have
concern.
concerns about the flats, so that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't still know whether it does say on it to seek consent to this following demolition. My simple mind would say, well, you can have consent to this, but you haven't got consent for demolition yet. So presumably, maybe you'll want to get consent for this to know if you can build this, then you'll come back with an application to demolish. Maybe that's how they work. I don't know.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. I tend to agree with Councillor Kerr on this issue. Certainly, pubs are part of this town's history. It's a historic building. I would be loath to see it demolished without proof that it cannot be used either as an ongoing pub or converted in a sympathetic manner, which this is not sympathetic. I also concur with the concerns regarding the number of flats in that area and what that will do to housing density and whether that's in keeping with our local community. So I personally am quite strongly against this development as it currently stands.
Councillor Wright.
First, I'll say that the need for one-bedroom accommodation in Oswestry is proven. So the fact that this is going to try to put in 12 flats, one bed, is a positive. I'll say that to start with. The observations I will make, the immediate impression I got was of an overbearing nature. If you look at the other flats in the area, some of them are 3-storey, some of them are 4, but they have the advantage that there is distance between themselves and the terrace on Albert Road. Having a triple-storey building like this opposite a 2-storey terrace of houses, to me gives an overbearing impression, because they'll be actually tall and overlooking those terrace houses. So that's one observation, a concern. I also have concern about parking. I believe there was one public comment on there when I looked at it today, which echoed the concern about parking, of having 12 flats and virtually no parking around them. But I do take on board that it's within 2 or 3 minutes of Oak Street car park, which has a residential parking permit scheme, and Oswald Road parking as well, which has something similar, I believe. And also the on-street around there allows you to park between 6 at night and 6 in the morning, or 8 in the morning. So I can take on board the actual comments from the developer that there could well be sufficient parking to actually accommodate this development. Having said that, I will still echo the fact that my bugbear around Oswestry are planning developments with insufficient parking, but I can't actually extend that too much in this case. As I said, apart from that, it does give one-bedroom flat accommodation. and it is sorely needed in Oswestry. So at the moment I am on the fence as far as going with Councillor Kern and his proposal.
I was going to say the same about parking. The street is very narrow and cramped as it is, and you have to remember that the parking that is there is not just for the residents, it's also for the people who use the church there. The church they've used for decades, been pushed out by flats that aren't even built yet. But I also want to mention, where are the recycling facilities going to go? I know there's a patch of grass behind the pub, but that's part of the Castlefields estate rather than this specific development. So where's that going to go? Just thought I'd add that as well. So for that reason, I can't support it either.
So in 2017, permitted development rights for pubs were the very last act of the coalition government to remove them. And as far as I can see, Duncan is right. I don't think there has been any application to demolish the Three Pigeons, and there needs to be a demonstrable proof that the Three Pigeons is not a viable business. I think we have to reject it on the basis, as far as I can see, I've trawled through for that address. I see no planning application or permission for demolition of the Three Pigeons, and I think we should reject it on the basis that permitted development rights for pubs were withdrawn in 2017, and there needs to be an application for demolition of the pub before there is an application for an alternative building on the site.
Thank you. The only other thing I would mention in terms of the overbearing part, if you look at the indicative floor plan, it's very close to the church, and to the point where your service in that gap will be impossible because you won't get a person down the gap between to clean out stuff. And because it's that close, it's going to need party wall agreement with the church, because with that size of building and the size of footings that are going to go in, it's quite possible it will undermine the church's foundations, and they'll have to sign off on that. But that's a separate agreement. But it does give me a great deal of concern about the scale of the building and the proximity to the church, because if it was butted right up to it on the layout, the red line plan shows, and bonded into the church, then it wouldn't be an issue. But because there's that tiny gap, it just creates problems down the line. Anybody else got any? Oh, sorry, Jane.
Thank you. It was a matter of a bit of concern. I also appreciate that there is a need for one-bedroom flats in the town, so I don't think that we should object to it that we shouldn't sort of say there's too many in that area, because the reason that there are that many in that area is clearly that there's a need in that area. But also, I didn't like that there weren't any particular details in Section 106 agreements, especially given this as far as I could tell, this was the full application, and it did mention that they were going to be using the amenities of the town, like as the open space they named Wilford Owen, and weren't providing virtually anything towards that, and also mentioned the bus station and the parking, and didn't mention anything to mitigate those impacts. So I was just a bit concerned that there weren't any agreements in place, or even being offered, to sort of soften the blow as far as they just wanted to try and force this through as soon as possible without giving anything back to the town.
But at least it's full application, so you can object to all of those things because they're all material to the. Aaron, have you got enough of that down, or do you need distilling?
Yeah, so my understanding is that you wish to object to the application on the basis that it doesn't reference the demolition of the pub, and there's been no evidence submitted to prove that it's a loss of a community asset and evidence of not a viable business, something like that, slightly in English. The point that Councillor Foreman made about permitted development rights being withdrawn in 2017. Section 15. 15. So that was in terms of the demolition. So that's your predominant, and then you have concerns about the fact that there's lots of accommodations of a similar type in the area and the appropriateness of that high density housing in that area, or additional high density housing in the area, although you do understand that there is an identified need in Oswestry. And then there are concerns regarding the overbearing nature on the properties at Albert Road. They're only two-storey terrace housing and it will overlook, and similar concerns about the scale of the building and its closeness or proximity to the neighbouring church.
It's about the demolition. Am I correct in thinking you can actually have planning permission on whatever you like? It wouldn't necessarily require the demolition to get the planning permission, and therefore commenting on the demolition, I'm just wondering if that's appropriate, because you can put planning permission on somebody's front garden, can't you? You wouldn't necessarily be able to do it, but the planning permission would be in, and in much the same way you could put planning permission for the building of something without actually having the demolition, because obviously the planning permission wouldn't be implemented because the demolition isn't in place. You see what I mean? I'm getting at.
Yeah, you're just talking about the sequencing, because anybody can apply for planning permission on anybody's land. They don't need to own it. I could apply for permission on your house.
But that's why I was thinking the demolition part of it wouldn't necessarily be material.
They will have probably... you can only suppose, but they might have decided we'll try for permission, and then if we don't get permission, then we won't even bother trying, because they'll have to pay a fee to apply for the demolition, same as they'd have to pay a plan. I don't know. I can't speak for them, and I don't think anybody can.
And I think given that there are a couple of questions regarding the sequencing, then I think it's right for you to present the comments, and planning officers may say, actually, town council got it wrong, which is fine, isn't it? But you've given, you've expressed your concerns, which is your role, isn't it?
Jonathan.
I know I've mentioned it before, and apologies if it's already been added, but can we make a point about the recycling facilities as well? Because we have factored that into other applications before, and I do think it needs to be said.
James.
It was just on that. I wouldn't be happy to support an objection based on it not being out of character the area to have high density, because there is high density there. So I wouldn't personally be happy to support an objection based on that.
Got here is the objection is based on the objective demolition of the building, because they haven't proved that there's and all that, and then you have concerns about the other stuff. Is how I've phrased it based on the conversation.
Yeah, I think we are entitled to object when we consider there's too much high density properties in one area, and I think you probably need to be aware that Star Housing will have concerns about the density of properties in that area anyway, and maybe taking plans to do something about that. So just because you've got that density, it's not a good idea to increase that density by more and more. It may be that area is already too dense to make a good quality living for people, and we should be restricting more dense development.
Right, for clarity, they can't grant planning permission for this without giving without going through the steps about demolishing the pub. It specifically says that you can't grant planning permission for development consisting of a change in use in of a building in England and any land within its curtilage from use within Class A4, which is the old class, to a mixed use considering any use that within a use and within Class A3. I.e., you cannot grant permission for an alternative use without going through the hoops and hurdles of closing down a pub. Okay?
It's essentially the same as a tied farm cottage. You've got to prove from advertising that you've done enough to show there's no... Cheers, see you. So in terms of what you've said, the concern is about the need versus the actual design of this design, and you're both saying things that are opposite, but that still means you've got a concern about it's a wider concern, isn't it? So you want to get rid of the specific part.
I just want to not say that we're concerned about high density planning in that location, seeing as there are other flats there currently that how are high density. That's how I currently understand the concern is that we'll be adding more high density into an area that is high density, so it's not out of place.
Yeah, but the point I'm trying to make is, in terms of when the officers weigh up the balance, that's their job. Our job is to identify the concern about the high density, either because it's that and or because of that. They're not mutually exclusive in terms of what we comment, because you could have 10 different views in this room and you could still articulate all 10 views. You don't have to have a binary choice. Doug?
Did move that I expressed concerns about the increase in high density properties in this area. And by all means vote against that, James, but I just want to say that's what I wish us to state as a council. We have concerns about that. And by all means put that to the vote.
I've just got a question. I'm not aware of Star Housing saying that they've got problems with high density. Because they actually own some of those flats, the only thing I'm aware of is that they want to make sure that they are up to standard in terms of energy efficiency and everything else. They actually run some of those flats, and I've not heard that they have concerns about the density in that area.
Take it from me as being on the board that there are issues, and
Yes,
it's not
I'm on the
about
board-
energy
I'm on the board
efficiency,
too.
it's about whether you can get tenants who actually want those properties going
Sorry.
forward.
I'll come back to what I said before. There's nothing to stop us commenting and saying even that the meeting was divided and there's 2 points of view on that particular thing, but both cause concern, and you can say that to Shropshire Council. You don't have to have a binary choice to say it's one or the other, because it's up to Shropshire Council to make that determination. But you can still highlight both sides of that debate.
I don't want the view from us to just be that everyone here has a concern about the high density.
Yeah, but that's what I've said you can do to accommodate that
Yeah, and that,
different
I just
view in
want to
the
make
thing,
sure
and
that
as long as Aaron's happy that he can articulate that in the thing that goes in with his head in his hands. Go on, Doug.
Ultimately, the council has to come down to one view, doesn't it? And if we put 2 views to the council, Shropshire to say, well, clearly there isn't a view. You've got both views being put to. So, I mean, if this is important, it may not be important, but if it's important, we have to have a view one way or the other. And just sometimes we have to put it to a vote and see what the majority think. I think that the density is an important consideration, and I have concerns about it. I'm not saying it must be turned down on that ground. I have concerns about it. And
But
that's as
what
far
I'm
as I
saying
want to
is
go.
you don't have to have that binary choice for us, because we're not the actual authority making the decision.
But
We can perfectly legitimately express 2 points of view
well,
if there's a divided thing in the room.
but in terms of my responsibility to the residents, I feel that that's in the best interest of Oswestry to put forward that view. Ultimately, Shropshire Council will decide as a planning authority with a host of other considerations. But my view is that there is a concern.
It's up for the room to decide. Grace.
Thank you very much, Mr. Walker, or Councillor Walker. I was going to suggest as a way forward, I feel that most of us are happy to raise the permitted development issue as a concern that there is due to the change in law, they cannot apply for this planning permission legally without having consent to demolish the whole building, and that would have to go through the tests. Am I right in feeling that is something that the room supports? I'm just trying to move us forward. So that's something that most of us seem to agree with. But there's more. But yeah. Yeah.
Well, if that was the case, they wouldn't have taken the application. They've just rejected it and say, no, you can't apply to build on the side of a pub unless you've got permission to demolish. The fact that they've gone out...
But we're not in a position to know any of
but maybe
that.
not.
So it's conjecture, isn't it, on our part, whether they need to apply or not apply.
Or
What they do need to do is comply with the law about change of use of the pub. You've got the concerns about the demolition not being applied for before. So there's broader things, but the prime thing in terms of objecting is that legislation that Duncan's quoted. But the point to Aaron is, can you word that particular concern so you've covered both points of view? That's all I'm asking. carry on,
Proceed.
sorry.
So the next point I was going to make is I think there is acceptance within the room as well that it is an area of high density housing. Is that fair? Some members feel it may make it too high density. Others felt it wouldn't be out of keeping, perhaps as a way forward, where both views are reflected, but it is an area of high density housing.
The Shropshire Council are the ones who've got to weigh up that and decide which is the determining factor. All we're doing is we're saying there's genuine concern across the piece on the whole thing. So they will then spend more time looking at it than if we didn't say anything at all. Just take Wendy first because she indicated before.
Yeah, I was just echoing what James had said. When I saw the application, it was a matter of there are already flats in the area, and I thought flats wouldn't be out of place in a place that's already got flats. But I also take on board the height of them and overbearingness and things like that. So.
But before you come in, Duncan, but just in terms of that, you can still have flats there, but it might be only 4 flats on a much smaller scale, and that might be acceptable, but that's Shropshire Council decision. You can only judge what you've seen in front of you, and so you're both right and you're both wrong in that kind of question. That's why I think you're better off saying what the broad concern is and the questions we need answering, rather than coming down one side or the other. Duncan.
To that, this in what they call a super output area, this micro area is one of the most deprived areas in Shropshire, and I think deprivation ought to go alongside. It's not just that it's high density; it's one of the most deprived areas of Shropshire, and those two factors do have a compounding effect. So I think that should just be added into the comments.
So you're happy, Aaron, that you've got the gist? Do you need a bigger piece of paper? So are you proposing that still, Duncan, in that? Yeah, yeah. Was anybody seconding that? Jonathan? Is everybody in favour of that? Thank you.
More detail, which we've got tipped up on in the past, which is that Aaron has to tick a box to say, are we commenting or objecting? And I think we should tick, we have to decide what box we want him to tick, because, bless him, Aaron ticked one box once and I disagree. So what
Duncan and Duncan have both basically said we should be objecting.
Yes, I think
that's
we
what
should, but I
everybody's
just
agreed
trying to
to.
give
So
clarification.
in terms of, but it's a caveated objection because of X, Y and Z. So, Jonathan.
I move we object.
Yeah, I took it as read because that was actually what was said at the beginning. Sorry. Right. Mile End Business Park, the subdivision of the commercial premises. Has anybody got any comments on that one? Mark?
I personally would support it. There's no external changes. It's all internal, and it's to help them with their business. Good luck.
So you proposed it and supporting it, yeah, and you're doing this. Okay. Is everybody happy with that? Thank you. The plough, Beatrice Street. Anybody got any comments or observations on this one? Duncan?
Seems sensible to me. I mean, the idea of making the ground floor into a restaurant, if they can make that work, fantastic. Top floors, 3 apartments, sounds perfectly right for that sort of development. Doesn't sound like multiple occupation, so I support this.
Also, to add, if it's appropriate, that it's good to see an empty building in that part of town being used again, and a historic building with so much experience behind is being put to use again.
Richard?
I was just going to say there's not enough restaurants in town, so I think it's a great idea and I support it.
The only thing I would add, when you look at the side elevation, what they're going to do is actually going to tidy up that whole elevation, and it'll actually look better and add value to the general conservation areas. Grace and then Mark.
Thank you, Councillor Walker. My only comment would be, as you point out, it's in the conservation area. I don't believe it's expressly listed. However, it does have things like a historic old mosaic floorway that I would hope we would ask to be protected on its way in, and some of the original features therein, apart from the windows and such, which are obvious, but it actually has historic fitted flooring that it would be a shame to lose.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy, if it hasn't been seconded already, I'm happy to second it. And also to say it's got parking. Yay! And that's not being built on, so. And also our own car park is just up the road as well, so that's great.
It's been proposed and seconded. Those in favour? Thank you very much. Number 15, Croxton Rise. Anybody got any comments on this one? Councillor Owen.
Yeah, there were no comments on the planning portal. It looks a straightforward extension to the back. I wish them well, and I'm happy to support.
It's been moved and seconded. Is everybody in favour of that? Thank you. It sounds sensible to me, but without really because there's a drawing in the application that shows the elevation, but it doesn't show you what was in the previous thing that was. So on the face of it, I suggest it's hard to argue about that one. But anyway, anybody got any comment?
Normally, I had difficulty seeing the difference. From the wording, it just sounds like they're increasing the roof line, is it, to remove the dormer section? I couldn't see any difference, so it's I couldn't see whether to support or otherwise. So. No observations? Yeah.
Yeah. TPO. Yeah. It was already on, sorry. Has anybody got any observations on that TPO application?
And to say the advice to 2 officers should be sought. You all know whether this is routinely done or not, but if it's routinely done, there's no point in us saying it. But if it's not, I'd like to make that comment.
Yeah, one of the many jobs that Martin Sutton has to do is all of these comments on their plan application. So it will get looked at, but expressing it's not a bad thing to do. Is everybody happy with that? Okay, thank you.